tears and make it freaking comfortable, man. Order it. Hi there, everybody. You all wondering why I'm wearing this, right? Yeah, that's exactly right. We're talking about Sonic the Hedgehog, ladies and gentlemen. And no, it's not about Sonic Frontiers. In case you didn't read the title and the thumbnail itself, we're talking about Sonic the Hedgehog, but in his GBA days, known as the Sonic Advance Trilogy, starting with Sonic Advance 1. You guys gotta buy me a Sonic shirt at some point because this is getting tiring. While I am aware we are also in the middle of the Mega Man X franchise, bear in mind that this small video marathon of the Sonic Advance Trilogy is not at all random. In fact, this entire trilogy for the Game Boy Advance has been on the back of my mind for quite a while now, especially considering that I did promise you guys that I would cover these games when we reach 3K here on YouTube, upon which we did, so thank you guys very much for that. And now here we are with a Sonic suit and everything. God, cannot believe this is my fate. What's even funnier about this is that Mega Man and Sonic have actually collaborated in the past besides Smash Ultimate and Smash 4, because there's actually a series of comic books dedicated to the Blue Bomber and Blue Blur of Speed joining forces and tackling against Eggman and Dr. Wily, so that's pretty interesting. And also either very coincidental or perfect timing. The judgment is on you there. What's even more of a coincidence, if you will, seeing the amount of Sonic discourse on Twitter about Sonic Frontiers since its debut, it seems like it's more than an appropriate time to discuss some of Sonic's earlier modern roots before the whole controversy of whether or not reused assets are a good or a bad thing occurred. Man, I sure snuffing love this community sometimes, and I love how much they appreciate Sonic. But to give some more background about my personal relationship with Sonic here, this blue hedgehog has been a character and a series for me since my early childhood days, dating as far back as 2004. Believe it or not, where 4-year-old me remembered watching my uncle, who at this point might also just be a recurring theme given how much the bastard has influenced my gaming decisions, pop the Sonic Mega Collection disc on the Nintendo GameCube, and I would often see him play the original Sonic the Hedgehog and Sonic 3 there, being one of the core memories that I have to this very day no less, given how much the Sega mascot struck a chord with me as I saw him go up and down and through loops and going as fast as he possibly can without a care in the world. And to kind of emphasize that feeling a little bit more, and I guess to give you more screen time with this suit, I'm telling you guys, please just give me a Sonic shirt at this point. I would love to rep that than this. It's getting pretty tiring, but anyway, tension aside, I remember watching the Sonic CD opening on the Sonic Mega Collection that they had in like one of the menus for it, and it was so amazing to see on like the old TVs back in the day, Sonic zooming through the speed of sound, the animation that Toei did for it, and the Sonic Boom song just playing in the background. Like, man, it was such an amazing and joyous moment of my life, and just wanted to throw that out there. It was also about 2 or 3 years later, at about 2006-2007, where my experience with the Blue Blur would also be a bit more apparent thanks to the GameCube ports of both Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2. Two games I do hope to cover someday, given how these were the games that influenced me the most to be the Sonic fan that I am today. That, and also I was pretty fond of that one Sonic game that was releasing for its 15th anniversary that I thought looked cool too. I wonder whatever happened to that one in the end. Beats me. But seeing that I was mostly exposed to Sonic through the console games, in terms of the handheld itself, well, Sonic Advance was nowhere to be seen or even heard from me, since I had zero idea of these games' existence to begin with, until the arrival of Sonic Rush came at our doorstep for the Nintendo DS back in 2008. I think around this time also I began playing the infamous Sonic Advance Flash version that was basically in every single Flash game website out there. Like, I'm talking Newgrounds, Fribs, and Cool Math Games era. Shout out to you three for making all our childhoods back in the early 2000s. It was there where I would experience a version of Sonic Advance that of course I absolutely enjoyed because it reminded me a lot of the Mega Collection back in the day, but I knew I was mostly intrigued by the pixelated artwork and how the game overall managed to blend the modern and classic elements together, as well as just being something different for me to experience as a Sonic fan. And you know what? Let's actually talk about the history of Sonic Advance while we're at it. 2001 is the year to thanks for giving us the idea behind Sonic Advance, if we want to get a little bit technical here. I mean, seeing that by this point in time, Sega was no longer officially a part of the console wars thanks to the ever-living success of the Sega Dreamcast and its crushing competition against both the Nintendo 64, Sony PlayStation, and now the emerging generation of consoles such as the Nintendo GameCube, Sony PlayStation 2, and Xbox, Sega now had to double down in making hardware and find some new ways of promoting the Blue Hedgehog than ever before through their software. If if that somehow makes any sense. But yeah, it was around this point where Sonic was beginning to be multi-platform, the way we know him as today, as deals from Sony and Nintendo were being thrown at them out the wazoo to ensure that at least the mascot that Sega grew fond of over the course of 10 years would still stay alive for a bit longer, more so with Nintendo than with Sony given their history both as rivals and now as unlikely friends of the bunch. Guess Sony was too much for them to tackle back in the day, and who could really blame them seeing that they already had about 2 or 3 mascots similar to Sonic the Hedgehog at that point. And thanks to this team up of sorts, it was here that the inception of the Sonic Adventure games being ported on the upcoming Nintendo GameCube would be announced, as well as additional titles for the Game Boy Advance, now taking the charge for the handheld setting and likely was eager to present the 3rd generation of Pokemon, among other things given how much of a dominating force that purple Digivice contained. And so with all of this thrown at them, Sega would now employ the third-party developers known as DIMS to work on this upcoming handheld Sonic Adventure, seeing that they did take a dip into that with Sonic Pocket Adventure back in 1999. But for many of us modern fans, we know these guys more so with the Sonic Rush trilogy later on for the Nintendo DS, which speaking of, I'm gonna make it known here and now that if you guys really enjoy the Sonic Advance marathon that I'm doing, I will definitely cover Sonic Rush Trilogy, because I actually have a lot more of a personal history with those games in terms of the handheld setting, like I've stated before, and I think it would be a really fun marathon to tackle in terms of like how a 3D Sonic works. So want to throw that out there, and yeah, I said it, Sonic Rush Trilogy, ratio me. Or don't. Anyway, let's move on here. Here, DIMS would then be on board and worked on the project alongside with Sonic team to develop a game that would, as they put it back then, be a modern approach to Sonic while reminiscing also on the classic elements that made Sonic's debut happen. And that's something that I would like to say real quick about Sonic Advance here. The entire Sonic Advance trilogy, to skip way ahead here for a bit, speaks of that classic to modern blend, and I really do commend both teams for doing that, as it made newcomers who never grew up with classic Sonic by this point in time would enjoy, as well as those who did rejoice in what Sonic games were always about. Though it is a shame that it's not something we done in recent memory, given how well developed and fast Sonic and the gang are in these games, and seeing the rise of Sonic Mania, I do hope Sega can take a dip with fan developers and give us something like Sonic Advance 4 or Sonic Advance Mania maybe? And you know what, who can really say for sure on that front? We'll just have to wait until Frontiers releases. Anyways, Sonic Advance, as the title would stand for the Game Boy Advance, would release for that handheld and was then showcased at the very first E3 convention, and also later at a Nintendo Space World event, you know, the Nintendo Directs back in the day, to then release later on that year in Japan and then in 2002 for the West, being published by THQ for some apparent reason. I guess they really wanted some money in the bank given that Sonic Advance would be like this massive hit or something, who can really say for sure. But besides that point, I think it's finally time to dive into the Sonic Advance Trilogy if you guys are ready for that, and considering that for many Sonic fans this is the golden goose or golden egg for some apparent reason, I'm actually excited to see why. And so ladies and gentlemen, get those Sonic shoes ready to go if you bought them and they sold out, whatever it is. It's time to finally tackle Sonic Advance 1 for the Nintendo Game Boy Advance. Oh no, X-Bang's up to no good again, so Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and now Amy here has to stop him, and that's honestly about it for the story. Like, no, I'm not exaggerating, this is legit what the entire game is all about. There are no space lizards trying to pest on the moon, there's no water dragons causing Noah's flood, and no party game with weird crystals to find. It seems that Sonic Advance is all just a simple plot of Eggman doing bad, and you gotta go stop him along the way. And that alone makes me intrigued by what Sonic Advance has to present overall, because this means the gameplay is all what the game needs to showcase in order for me to see what the deal really is with this one. Now, I don't know if the other games are going to do the same thing in terms of presenting such a bare bones plot, but it's not like I'm complaining either, more so just wondering, well, what exactly was the whole purpose of Sonic Advance to begin with? And the answer here, well, bring a modern take on the classic formula, because yeah, that's basically what Sonic Advance is all about. You play as 4 characters, you go through the same number of zones, you beat Eggman the same way, and rinse and repeat, but this is just me explaining it to you as if you were a fan of the classic era to begin with, which I would imagine many still were by the time 2002 was around the corner. But for those that didn't grow up with the Sonic Adventure era like I did and many other Sonic fans who did during the early 2000s, and I think the best way to describe Sonic Advance, as well as the whole trilogy for that matter, is that it was the Sonic Mania before Sonic Mania even existed. And here's why I say this. As stated, the modern take of the classic formula is very prevalent in Sonic Advance, starting with the character models of Sonic and the gang, as they all look more like their Sonic Adventure counterparts more so than their classic ones. And looking at this almost 20 years later, goddamn, the GBA pixel art still to this very day remains consistent in its presentation. Like, I'm wondering what kind of magic Nintendo had up their asses in that system's hardware to provide the most incredible pixelated graphics that to this very day continues to look fresh and modern as opposed to most games that were releasing around that time. Sonic and the gang here just look so well done in their animations, and it's just so pristine and specifically detailed that I really enjoyed the little touches that Dims made to ensure that Sonic Advance wasn't entirely a classic Sonic formula game on handheld, but something that could still be a part of the modern timeline, so to speak, in terms of Sonic's adventuring days. And as someone who grew up with the Sonic Adventure era, that makes me appreciate Sonic Advance a whole lot more now. However, that being said, this game still emanates that classic formula, but mostly through its zone design and aesthetics. Sonic Advance has the usual green hill / beach zone, a military base zone, a carnival zone like that of Sonic 3, an ice zone like that of an ice cap zone, and of course, like in Sonic 2, you're high up in space for a final zone. So there are again those elements that classic Sonic provided, among many other things here. Loops are prevalent, the stop and go in certain zones are established primarily in the middle two, and of course you have the usual gimmicks and platforming challenges that make Sonic, or rather classic Sonic, stand out with some additions from its modern contributions like the grind rails, which rarely show up, I gotta be honest, so I guess they don't count. And even if they did, it was kind of hard for me to use them since they don't have this hit detection when you're close to it, so I guess these were probably last minute decisions, who can really tell. And like the classic games too, at the end of the second act of each zone, you're faced with new machinations that Eggman has up his sleeves again, utilizing his knowledge from the past and wondering how he's going to tackle the gang here this go around. Yet I say this, and by the final zone, Eggman is using his weapons from the classic games, which is a neat little Easter egg. Props to Dims and Sonic Team for utilizing that, but also Eggface. If they didn't work then on Sonic, what makes you think they're gonna work on him now, huh? Now going back to the zones, I want to say that I like what they offer, I really do, but I can't say much about them because these zones can easily be seen again and again in the previous games, especially if you played Sonic 2 and Sonic 3 back in the day, and now more so with the help of Sonic Origins, say what you will about that collection. But these zones, you guys, I'm sorry to say, they aren't that special at all to me because they practically are the same thing as their classic counterparts, but now they have a bit of a 30-bit to polish to them, and that's honestly about it. I mean, they get the job done, and that's fine and all, but I wish there was slightly more emphasis on newer stage themes to make Sonic and the gang stand out a bit more besides the GBA pixelated graphics, or at least apply more of the modern platforming elements of Sonic games, like the homing attack for instance, to kind of keep the momentum going and add some more flavor to these classic style stages. And to talk about the controls here alongside these stages, Sonic and the gang, or at least Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles since Amy is playable here for the very first time, play roughly like their classic counterparts as well, which by no means is a bad thing for this first game anyways. Sonic runs, jumps, spin dashes, and has the insta-shield from Sonic 3, a nice detail that I admire, but he plays the same as classic Sonic, so what you know from those games, just apply them here and you'll breeze through those stages like it's a regular Saturday morning. The same is said with Tails and Knuckles, where Tails flies, swims, and I guess does this twin tail attack at times, which kind of reminds me of the attack from Sonic Adventure, and as far as I'm aware, I don't think this was even in the original trilogy, but he plays the same as the classic era too, and personally my favorite because of these abilities. I mean, with the swim ability alone, it made breezing through the water section of Ice Mountain Zone easier, and like those games, those twin tails can be lethal, so use them as caution since their hitbox isn't as strong as they seem to be. And with Knuckles, it was the standard running, jumping, gliding, and wall climbing like he did back in the classic game, so again, not much explanations with him, but like Tails, he was quite fun to mess around with because of these classic features, so major compliments to Dims for not only retaining that identity of the classic games, but also trying to keep things slightly fresh and simple for newcomers here. And then there's Amy, where, okay, she runs and does the job done in platforming, sure, but her means to attack requires to use her hammer, and she doesn't have a spin dash like Team Sonic here, but instead this pathetic little forward jump that barely gives any distance. I mean, sure, this suits her nature, what her character is, but I wouldn't mind having more of what the other guys offer and just apply it to Amy. Kind of like what they did with Sonic Heroes, for example. Alas, Amy here feels like a one-to-one recreation of her Sonic Adventure counterpart, and that isn't a good thing when you look back on that. Overall, I think I quite enjoyed my time with this one, and it's nice to know that Dims wanted to keep things as simple as possible without trying too hard at making Sonic different from his classic era days. However, there are some things I do find fault on Dims' behalf with Sonic Advance here, and that is mostly the layout of the zones themselves and how in some cases you're out and about with supersonic speed, but suddenly you're at a stop and have have to do the equivalent of Marble Garden Zone platforming, which isn't fun first of all, and it kinda does ruin the pacing a bit I find, as well as not also really emphasizing the skills Sonic and the gang have here that would allow for different pathways to clear the stage as fast as possible, like you would then in the classic games, which was the very reason of playing these guys in the first place now that I think about it. But the biggest fault I have to say about Sonic Advance though has to go to the special stages, because why in Mobius did they think it was a good idea to utilize the pseudo 3D graphics of the GBA to make these stages in the first place? Seriously, it doesn't work at all, Sonic Team. It was so confusing to see the depths of these rings, and it also felt very disorienting that I honestly did not bother to collect the Chaos Emeralds here. No sir, I'm not willing to test my patience at all, as well as my feel of depth on what is considered to be bad game design, even if it's for the sake of possibly getting another ending for this game. You know, hopefully the other games kind of fix those special stages, because I think there's a lot of potential in that, and I really do want to see that final boss. Now of course, I would like to say more about Sonic Advance here, but for what was presented in the end, I think I've said all I needed to say for this one at least. It's fun, it's solid enough to enjoy for a good hour or two, and it's what a Sonic game is at the end of the day. A platforming based on speed, momentum, and just overall excitement to reach the end of the stage as fast as possible. Now with 3 more buddies to join you on this task and more. And if you want to play this, then by all means go for it, since it is Sonic at its finest, no BS attached, and just something to mindlessly go around and enjoy for a good few hours or so. And honestly, that's about it for Sonic Advance 1, so here's hoping I do see a lot more of Sonic Advance 2, since that's coming up next. Obviously we have Mega Man X4 down the line as well, so stay tuned for that one. And of course, if you're new in the bunch, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I gotta do that self-promotion, because YouTube is, you know, it is what it is. But for those that have been here for a very long time, obviously you guys know how I like to end it. So thank you guys so much for all the support. Keep being awesome. Keep spreading love and kindness into the world. Keep improving yourselves each and every day by 1%. And know that I love you guys forever and always to 120. And I can't wait to see you all next time. Remember guys, stay freaking sexy. Stay safe out there. And take care. Oh, hey everybody! Oh, why was I on the floor, you're asking? Nah, don't worry about it. That has nothing to do with what we have to talk about today, because today we're continuing on with the Sonic Advance Trilogy, followed by Sonic Advance... Hey yo, what the fuck? Sonic Advance back in 2001 and in 2002 proved to be such a massive success for both Sonic Team and Dimps that you wouldn't be surprised that about a year or so later, both in 2002 and in 2003 for the West, Sonic Advance 2 would be in game stores for the Game Boy Advance, providing us another good handheld Sonic adventure that would give us more or less the modern classic blend of Sonic platforming, as well as just improving the things that Sonic Advance did wrong, while sticking to something that ultimately results in being one of the best 2D Sonic games I've ever experienced. I'll go a little bit more into details on that later, but I wouldn't be exaggerating here when I say that out of the entire trilogy of Sonic Advance here, I found a lot more enjoyment in playing Sonic Advance 2, more so than the other two, because to me it stands out a lot more in terms of what a Sonic platformer is, especially in 2D aspects. But before we do talk about that, I gotta talk about the story real quick. Eggman is back at it again, causing trouble for Sonic and friends here, except this time around he has them kidnapped, so it's up for Sonic the Hedgehog here to rescue them and stop Eggman from his plans in space once again, as well as help Cream the Rabbit, a new character that debuts in this game to help find her mother Vanilla, which can only be done by either completing her route or by gathering all the 7 Chaos Emeralds during Sonic's campaign, to then proceed to throw some supersonic hands at Eggman because for some reason she was kidnapped by him too. But anyways, long before you beat the bald man as usual, Sonic saves Vanilla, the day is saved, and all is well for Sonic to live another day and proceed to head on to another adventure. That's a nice story plot summary by yours truly and all. I mean, yeah, but where the hell is Amy in this? Like last time, the game takes a backseat on the story, and so it's up for the gameplay to once again shine through and see what this sequel has to offer in terms of the Sonic Advance experience. And what exactly does it offer? Well, what you would expect out of a Sonic game, of course: zones to traverse through, 7 Chaos Emeralds to collect, an Eggman boss encounter at the end of each zone, and rinse and repeat with 4 other characters: Tails, Knuckles, Cream, and Amy as an unlockable route for some bizarre reason. Don't ask why, it just happens. I guess they just wanted Cream and Cheese to get the spotlight for this one, which I can't blame them, but goddamn, Amy got screwed over. Zone themes and designs are pretty original this go around too. I mean, okay, well, sort of, since you do have some repeats, like Hot Crater reminded me a lot of Sonic Adventure 1's Red Mountain, with the enemy sprites and aesthetics looking very similar to it, and you also got Ice Paradise, a more refined version of Ice Mountain, removing the water sections entirely and just dealing with more ice platforming and slides. And of course you got Leaf Forest, looking like that of a Green Hill zone, but no complaints there since they do get the job done. But then you got some cool ones too, like Music Plant Zone, where it's all music themes and vibrant with its color palette. Sky Canyon with its rough but fair level design also reminded me a lot of Skyrail from Sonic Adventure 2, and personally my favorite of the bunch despite what people say about its difficulty. And then there's Techno Base, which, major epilepsy warning here, so I do advise to just listen and just whatever, because man does it really get flashy in its design, and it's very off-putting too. It just feels like a major fever dream every single time you go through each of its zones, holy hell. But after this you got Egg Utopia, which is the final challenge for the gang here as they tackle Eggman once again in space. Who could have thunk? Now you can definitely say in some cases that Sonic Advance 2 is indeed a sequel to Sonic Advance 1, and we can kind of argue a little bit more when we get to Sonic Advance 3 and whatever fiasco that presented, but with Sonic Advance 2, we're barely scratching the surface here, folks. Like, wow, there's a lot that I haven't even said so far. Now, Sonic Advance 2 is not exactly like Sonic Advance 1, where in that game, it was mostly focusing on keeping things safe for newcomers and old-timers when it came down to what they knew best about Sonic in the classic era, no less. Sure, Sonic and the gang went supersonic speed, but there was that stop-and-go elements that I mentioned, as well as just a simplicity to Sonic Advance that made things work, but didn't overstep its boundaries in terms of trying something new for the franchise, despite the fact that they tried the modern and classic elements altogether. However, with Sonic Advance 2 here, yeah, you might want to buckle up for this one. Sonic Advance 2 is the complete opposite of what Sonic Advance did, as it emphasizes a lot of the speed that Sonic is known for and keeping things roughly a straight line with some alternative pathways to use along the way, making the pacing as well as momentum steady if you know what you're doing. For most of the stage designs themselves, they are what you would expect, which is great for this game because alone you got the standard classic elements, and all of a sudden you are given grind rails to use, boost rings for maximum maritime, and basically anything that you saw in the adventure era or even today with the modern era, you see them more apparent when Sonic Advance 2. The stages are way longer this time, having one checkpoint in the middle, which is kind of a minor complaint that I have, but whatever it is, and the entire game will have Sonic go from point A to point B in the fastest time possible, and that's the great importance of this game as well. The entire basis of this game is speed, and how do you pick up on said speed? We'll have Sonic run as fast as he possibly can, and in a brief moment he will start to have a boost more or less in terms of his speed. Well, he will run like there's no tomorrow, easily breezing through the stage in some loops and grind sections, as well as just getting to the end as fast as possible while keeping the momentum going. Plus, it's just so fun to see Sonic go from alright, time for my morning jog to gotta go fast, baby! See! I'm telling you, the game never felt so fast when compared to the previous ones, let alone the classic era or even the adventure era, because Sonic goes so fast that it is insane. Easily the best thing about Sonic Advance, as well as the tricks that you can do by pressing the R button and the direction where you plan on going, giving Sonic some neat airtime and cool ways to attack besides the standard jump, and now homing attack that he gets for this one too. Only him though, and kinda makes sense too, since Amy, Tails, and Knuckles are the same as before and already have some major perks to them, which the same sentiment can go for Cream too. Wow, what a debut she got. Well, Cream does the usual stuff in platforming like jumping, flying with her rabbit ears like that of Tails, and spin dashing. Cream is also stupidly easy when it comes to boss fights. This is mostly because for some reason Dimps decided to give this ability to Cream that allows her to send out cheese like a command and just attack as if he's some kind of a JoJo stand and obliterate Eggman in like 3 turns. Holy hell, chows are not something to be messed with, they sure got hands. Now with all these features and just this sense of a proper direction in both level design and platforming, this alone makes Sonic Advance 2 one
one of the more fun adventures I've had with Sonic on both the handheld and just in general when it comes to the franchise. You can definitely see that in some ways, Dimps essentially made the prototype to the boost formula that we all know and love today from the modern Sonic games and from the Sonic Rush trilogy specifically, since that's where the inception of the mechanic took place. I mean, just to speed through the zones like they're nothing is what I love the most about this game, and really adds that sense of momentum so long as you keep the speed intact and use those tricks to your advantage.
Now, if we were to categorize the Advance Trilogy so far, I'd say with Sonic Advance 1, it did deal a lot more with the exploration value of a Sonic game, while with Sonic Advance 2 here, it showcases a lot of that speed and momentum that we know Sonic games to be nowadays, which is not a bad thing, mind you, if you want, the Sonic fans to tell you otherwise, but it is something that indeed showcases the talent, ability, and skills that is needed at the end of the day to make a Sonic game work. But then there's one small problem with that. Actually, I lied. There's two small problems with that. I'm sorry, but what the fuck?
The first problem that I have with Sonic Advance 2 is that despite the enjoyment of running through the stages as fast as possible, this does hinder, in my opinion, the layout of the stages in terms of that aforementioned exploration value. Again, the stages are very linear, and though they do have alternate pathways for you to try out, you most likely will be stuck in one from start to finish, and if you do try to sneak your way into another one for the sake of exploration, then the whole game comes to a screeching halt, and to pick up that speed and momentum again feels lost, which then leads to my second problem that this game has: the special rings and the special stages. While I did say I wanted the special stages for the other two games to be improved compared to the mess that I experienced back with Sonic Advance 1, here with Sonic Advance 2, they did improve on the special stages in terms of what it offers. You got Sonic running around a small Fusudo 3D space, and you need to collect 300 rings within the time limit, while also dealing with the Eggman robot that chased Amy during Sonic Adventure 1. A neat detail that I quite like here. These special stages do have their quirks, make no mistake on that front, since it was pretty wonky to control Sonic here and collect the rings as intended, especially if you want to keep that multiplier intact and just easily get the 300 ring quota in that way. But for what it is, and compared to the atrocity that the skateboard was back in Sonic Advance 1, I'll take these any day, and it's nice to reference the Sonic CD special stages too, to give some level of spotlight to that game as well. But that doesn't negate the way that these stages are accessed though, because why, oh why, did they do it the way they did it here? So in order to activate the special stage, in each act of each zone, there are these special rings to collect that are scattered throughout the stage itself, and you must collect all 7 of them to then get greeted with a special stage thereafter completing. And though the 7 special rings are something in its entirety, that's not the main issue I find, since they give us an incentive to explore the stage and try and make the most out of it. But it's the fact that they are 7 of them that you need to collect, and with the fact that you are going through high speeds in each act, to then have to stop and find them along the way greatly causes the stage design a huge detriment in the end, and this greatly puts off the reward of collecting the Chaos Emeralds that you need in order to unlock the true boss, and it just sucks, period. No, I do not like this at all. To put this in perspective, let's say that in order to collect a Chaos Emerald in a modern Sonic game today, you would have to find all 5 red rings in the stage to do it, and seeing how we all love the red rings mechanic, you now understand where I'm coming from. This idea alone cripples the game for me, because while you can grab 1 or 2 no problem, it's the mere fact that you have to have a mental layout of the map and huge tolerance to insanity in order to get it done. But I am not saying that I am against the idea entirely though, because if it is just 1 special ring to find in the stage, then that would be fine, since it's 1 to look out for and not 6 others to then worry about. It would still add that exploration value as well as keeping the speed and momentum intact.
Keep this in mind, because you only need Sonic at the end of the day in order to unlock the true ending in Sonic Advance 2, so if you ended up just playing the other 3 characters and collected the Chaos Emeralds in their playthrough, well, you done indeed screwed yourself over there, my guy.
But that's about it in terms of the problems I had with Sonic Advance 2, because overlooking this and playing the game normally, it's still a fun time no matter which character you end up choosing, and you can clearly see that Dimps made some massive improvements to this one, no doubt in my mind. In fact, to put this in perspective, Sonic Advance 2 is like the equivalent to Sonic 2 back in 1992, seeing that there were a lot of improvements being made when compared to its predecessor, and again, going back to that sense of identity that Sonic Advance as a sub-series is presenting. There are a lot of good qualities to this game that bar and none make Sonic Advance 2 an enjoyable adventure to pick up in the end. After all, Sonic and the gang are animated well, they function as intended, the speed is there thanks to the layout of the stage. Despite what I said in terms of what it goes against it, this alone makes Sonic Advance 2 overall one of my favorite experiences with Sonic to date. Being up there with Sonic Mania, of course, in terms of the classic era, Sonic Adventure 1 in terms of its personality, and Sonic Unleashed in terms of its speed and level design. Which, seeing that we're getting closer to Sonic Frontier's release date, this alone makes me appreciate Sonic a whole lot more, and I honestly can't wait to see him shine properly in November, which, god, that is just so damn soon!
Now, while I did date this video at the end here, what I said about Sonic Advance 2 at the end of the day will be timeless. I really enjoyed this one as far as you can tell, especially more so than the first one. And that's the thing about making these videos sometimes, that you get to experience certain games that you never grew up with, and especially with a series as Sonic that, like I've said, I've grew up with this franchise since 2003. It's so nice to kind of tackle some of the sub-series and certain side games here and there that you never got to experience back in the day. And here with Sonic Advance, you get to see a whole new fresh perspective on that with a little hint of nostalgia here and there, but you know, that's for an entirely different topic and an entirely different day. For now, it's time to get ready for the finale of the Sonic Advance Trilogy here as we tackle Sonic Advance 3 and whatever it is has to present for us on Sonic's front, on our front, and whatever it decided to do as a whole. So stay tuned for that video. Thank you guys so much for the support as always. I love you guys forever and always to 120. Stay safe, stay sexy, and keep doing good into the world, okay? Make sure to stay tuned for that next one, and take care now! I wonder when was the last time I did a Sonic video on the channel. I know it's been a long time, but I don't know how long has it been. Let me check real quick. Oh, it's been that long? Ooh, well, let me change that real quick.
Sonic Advance 3!
Oh, Sonic Advance 3, huh? That's the topic of today. Ooh, yeah, we're definitely gonna be here for a while. So just grab the popcorn and we're just, yeah.
Alrighty then, so we know how we all feel about the blue blur of Speed, correct? He's snarky, confident, a bit goofy sometimes, and we all love him just the same despite what we have to say about certain games. That's like a given. But we know that when it comes to Sonic as a franchise, there will be fun times and there will be whatever the hell Sonic Advance 3 is at the end of the day, and oh man, the many things I have to say about you today is insane. For those that have seen my previous reviews regarding the Sonic Advance Trilogy so far, you already know my personal history of these games. But for those that are new, well, let me repeat myself like the broken ass record that I am and also say welcome. Thank you for stopping by and witness what's to come in the next few minutes. Well, I grew up with the adventure era in the early 2000s with Sonic Mega Collection, Sonic Heroes, Sonic Adventure 1 and 2's GameCube boards, Shadow the Hedgehog, and the Sonic Rider sub-series. The handheld setting was surprisingly nowhere to be seen on my end besides Sonic Rush for the Nintendo DS. But we all know how I feel about this game in particular, but hey, I'm not stressing that just yet. But now, after tackling the previous Sonic Advance games last year and giving them their respective spotlight, I'd figure that as a means to finally see what Dimps was offering on the GBA front, I would close this chapter on the Sonic Advance series with a Sonic Advance 3 video here, which I know for one that this game was something. Like, this game was definitely something.
See, now look, I've complained about Sonic 06 or every other bad Sonic game like a true Sonic fan would, but Sonic Advance 3 somehow managed to make me reconsider those thoughts.
And I know for one that there are going to be some out there that will defend this game to the bitter frickin' end. I completely get it, and I've been there on both the front and receiving end when it comes down to defending games that we all love and have played as a kid or even recently. It's just part of the way of life for a gamer today, and as a Sonic fan specifically, yeah, look man, it's just the way the world works. But Sonic Advance 3 isn't one of those games, Sonic or otherwise, that I would defend so bombastically, since what this game offered doesn't sit right with me for reasons I'll get into later. Of course, like all Sonic games, whether good or bad, there must be a history to go over about their releases back then, and Sonic Advance 3 is no different in that case. Releasing for the GBA in 2003 for Japan and 2004 for the West, with THQ publishing once again, and receiving roughly the same success as its predecessors, Sonic Advance 3 presented something for the blue blur of Speed and friends, what is basically their third Nintendo handheld adventure, while on the console setting having Sonic Heroes on the forefront for Sonic fans to enjoy and also realize that they've treated these games harshly all those years later. The life of a Sonic fan surely is something to feel proud of, no?
No, not really.
However, with the growing popularity of the Game Boy Advance and whatever the hell the Nintendo GameCube was doing at the time with its releases, Dims decided that for this third installment to the sub-series, they felt like trying a few things out when it came down to that 2D Sonic formula, and in the case of Sonic Advance 3, they came with the conclusion of presenting Sonic's GBA adventure at the time by saying, "Hey, so you guys remember Sonic Advance 1 and 2?
Well, I know where this is heading.
Look, whatever your feelings are about this game particularly, what remains a fact is that what Sonic Advance 3 had going for it was being a 2D Sonic game that decided to do whatever the hell it wanted, and how it did that was combining all, and I really mean all, the elements of Sonic Advance 1 and 2. Be it from the level theme and design, the controls and gimmicks for enemies or traps, the functionality of each and every character, all of this was crammed into Sonic Advance 3's ass so hard that already right out the gate of me playing this game, I felt like I was going to have one of the times of my life.
Again, this one's gonna be a fun one, so let's see what the game offers and pray I don't get scorched earth by all the Sonic fans out there. Let's just face the facts here. I'm already gonna get scorched earth with the amount of times I've called Sonic Rush mid. How low am I gonna go already?
Sonic Advance 3 starts us off with Eggman once again, who after being blown away in space for who knows how many times now because he couldn't piss on the moon any further, decided that the game is up for Sonic and the gang by now utilizing the power of the Chaos Emeralds to not only help in creating his Eggman Empire, again, but also in splitting the world into 7 pocket universes because he decided to say screw it, I'm done playing games. As per usual, it's up to Sonic and the ragtag team of Tails, Knuckles, Amy, and Cream to once again stop Eggman from succeeding in his plans, restore the world back to normal, take a group photo to celebrate their massive W, and move on with their lives. Which, yeah, this is basically the entire plot of Sonic Advance 3. It's another standard Sonic adventure that takes inspiration from both the classic and adventure era without overstepping too much of its boundaries. Much like how the previous two games handled theirs, Sonic Advance 3's lack of proper story isn't something that I think detracts this game's overall experience, since at the end of the day, it's all about how fast Sonic goes and how well the level designs in each zones are, and I think that's the most important part about these games, instead of trying to figure out the moral philosophy of an egg-shaped bald man or why the Master Emerald can somehow turn the world back to normal. But despite me saying that I don't care about this game's story, there is one thing to take note of in terms of Sonic Advance 3's plot, and that is that it takes place after the events of Sonic Battle, the poor-ass attempt at making a Sonic fighting game that also released for the GBA at the time. Now, why a battle game and a handheld platformer are connected here is mainly because alongside Eggman's plans to create that multiverse of madness, he also had leftover data to create Gemerald, the upgraded version of Emerald that you get to encounter throughout the course of this game as sort of like a Metal Sonic counterpart, which I guess it's a neat touch? I mean, Emerald was cool and all, especially loved him in the Sonic X episodes when he debuted, but I don't understand why they decided to bring a side game into the continuity here, especially with how little of importance it is at the end unless you're playing as Cream and unlocking the true ending, which they all live happily ever after, while Vector is out there grabbing the Sonic equivalent of milk. It also bothers me that Sonic Battle is referenced here because I wish we were allowed to play as Shadow and Rouge as extra modes to see how they would work in a 2D Sonic game, which sadly ended up being a major missed opportunity here with Sonic Advance 3. Something that I know Sega won't do, but the fans will sure as hell do, so major salute to all the Sonic modders and fan developers out there, you the realest of ones. Moving on from the story now and entering what Sonic is mostly known for, Sonic Advance 3's gameplay is what you would expect to see from a standard 2D Sonic game. So yes, of course you got the usual zone structures as before, and you got Eggman to beat at the end of each of them with whatever vehicle he has up its sleeve to combat Sonic and the gang here, which holy mother Mobius, Eggman isn't playing this time around. There are also some changes in the game structure that make Sonic Advance 3 the most interesting here when compared to the previous two Advance games. With the previous two games, you get to choose your character and get the journey going immediately, but somehow with Advance 3 here, instead of starting the stage like the previous games did, you're sent immediately into an overworld after witnessing the brief cutscene. And yeah, you heard me correctly, I said an overworld. In a 2D Sonic game. Look, I admire the attempt of an overworld for Sonic to traverse through. I mean, Sonic Adventure 1, Unleash, and Frontiers are my favorite Sonic games because of how well they handled that department. They brought us a nice sense of world building and understanding that Sonic's adventures in these games are larger than life and makes traversing through them all the more enjoyable. However, those examples I brought up are all 3D Sonic games that run on console, so how do I feel about the overworld structure in this 2D pixelated handheld Sonic experience, you may be asking? God God, Sonic Advance 3's overworld is so lackluster that it hurts my eyes even looking at it. The designs for them are poorly executed and don't scream the zone's themes and aesthetics before entering a stage because it's nothing but a weird background you can't really see well and a foreground of blocky platforming that just looks so stupid and out of place. Definitely not my favorite thing about this game, and that's not saying much. But like I said already, if you enjoy this game then you do you, but in the case of the stage designs and presentation, it's not something that I can get behind in full honesty. But let's start with the positives before I inevitably become a true Sonic fan and tear this game down to shreds. For one here, I don't mind the layout of some of the stages here since they do give some aspects of the previous games in terms of gimmicks, traps, and enemies that makes a standard 2D Sonic game work. Now work properly, you may be asking? You tell me. I do have some favorites zooming through the speed of sound like Sunset Hill Zone, Twinkle Snow Zone, and Ocean Base Zone, but others like Toy Kingdom Zone, Chaos Angel Zone, and almost the rest of the game in its entirety just made me feel uneasy for no apparent reason. It's like that feeling you get sometimes when you're playing a game or doing something that somehow your stomach twists and turns, and you kind of feel like going, oh. Well, that's how I feel with Sonic Advance 3's level design. There are just a lot of things that don't work for me in regards to what Sonic Advance 3 presents, and it's mainly due to its combined efforts of pulling everything from the previous games and just trying to make things work, like in the case of the stop and go elements from Sonic Advance 1. Sure, it gets the job done in at least halting the speed a bit, which was something I critiqued back in Sonic Advance 2, but if it's constant and suddenly in your face when you're not even looking, then we have a major issue here, and when you pair it with the speed and boost that Sonic Advance 2 already provided, then things start to not make any real sense here, especially when you start seeing this all the time. But that's honestly a minor complaint, and the things that I do have to complain about I'll go in depth in a second, but to say one positive thing about these stages, I like how long they could take to complete. Unlike Sonic Advance 1 and 2 where they take about 2 minutes max, these stages take about 5 minutes to complete each, and for a Sonic fan, I know this sounds rather long, but I can't help but find this part rather enjoyable. There is always something so fun and explorative in each zone that despite me hating its contents, I find a sense of wonder as to where else can I take Sonic and the gang as route to the next checkpoint available, and that's pretty exciting the more looking back. Some of the routes to take can be weird to find though, since I'm sure with a tiny screen the GBA had wouldn't opt for a more wide scope of where to go next like it would on a console, but for what it offered something unique and I guess refreshing when compared to the simplistic stop and go elements from Sonic Advance 1 and the precursor to the modern Sonic stage in Sonic Advance 2. It's a nice blend I find, and one I wouldn't mind seeing more often. Despite that praise though, the zones still don't feel as functional as I think Thim's intended them to be, and on occasion I felt like in some parts of the stages there was some RNG bullshit that got the best of me. I swear I don't understand the sudden placement of the stop and go elements or even with the enemy and spike gimmicks here, and if you're someone like me, after getting your ass whooped in a Sonic game for the 10th time already, you're really asking for it, no questions asked. The gimmicks for these stages too are no help either, and while they seem fine and in tune with the zone's themes and aesthetics, they don't really do that much in adding any sort of fun to them. Sure, you got the springs that swing you sideways in Sunset Hill Zone and the panda spinning carts in Toy Kingdom Zone, sure, they were fine, but that's the problem. They were fine gimmicks that don't amount to much in the grand scheme of the already horrendous level design some of these stages have. Chaos Angel Zone and Cybertrack Zone especially come into mind in those aspects because my god, what was Dim's even cooking with these zones to begin with? Like, I like Chaos Angel as a concept, who wouldn't, since it's to reflect on Sonic Advance 1's Angel Island Zone and given some importance to the game's lore, so to speak, with how the Chaos Emeralds are the only way to fix the world because of course they can. It's the Chaos Emeralds we're talking about here. And playing this game, especially after beating Frontiers, is now fun knowing that the second moon you see in the final boss of the regular ending of Advance 3 is awfully staring down at us like, hey, you animal you haven't seen it all, but this zone's overall execution is just a mess of a stage that makes you think that it's trying to challenge you, but really is trying to punish you for no real reason other than to say, gotcha bitch!
I'm bringing out the bottle.
What's even more annoying about the stage designs is that if you suddenly have a boost in speed, which just means Sonic and the gang having that silhouette from Advance 2, you'll immediately lose it because of the aforementioned stop and go elements, and this in turn just makes dealing with the game as if it's some kind of a chore, easily making the game go from, wee, I'm really feeling it now, to, oh god, let this hell end already.
I swear, this game is making me lose my mind.
To at least continue with another positive, I will say that the theme aesthetics are something I absolutely love, since in some ways you can argue Sonic Advance 3 seems to be the closest feeling of bringing parts of the adventure era into a full 2D setting. Again, this makes sense in some ways when you consider Sonic Battle to be canon to the story, which is also canon to the adventure games, and now reminding myself of that little tidbit here, I now have this mental image of linking Sonic Battle and Sonic Frontiers because oh my god, they're in the same universe now. You mostly see these with Route 99 having a city escape feel from Sonic Adventure 2, and Chaos Angel Zone reminded me a lot of Lost World and Angel Island from Sonic Adventure 1, which are fine touches to this game and creates a safe continuity of sorts in terms of what modern Sonic was providing back then, making me appreciate the game a little bit more now since I am someone who grew up with this era of Sonic. However, that's really about it in terms of adding some identity when compared to the previous games, because like all Sonic games, you will have your repeats regardless of what people have to say about original level design. You still got the green hills, the ice caps, the lava reefs, and metallic madness type of stages going for you, and that's not much of a critique at this point as it is a mere fact with this franchise, because where else is Sonic going to, huh? Space? Well, too bad, he's done that shit so many times now.
But I haven't even stressed the one thing that makes Sonic Advance 3 so unique as a 2D Sonic game that just made me lose it. And that's none other than having the stupid buddy system this game just decided to do.
Sonic Advance 3 introduces the team up mechanic, and if you played Sonic Heroes, then you know more or less what DIMS decided to do in this game regarding this mechanic. It's just another gimmick in place with the amount of BS this game already provided that allows you to use a secondary character's abilities for both better exploration and traversal through stages. It also allows for some replayability, because in case I didn't mention this now, goddamn, from the start of the game you only have Sonic and Tails at your disposal here, and over the course of progressing through the game naturally, you unlock the other characters to play as, and with this team up mechanic in mind, this also means you have now an itching feeling in the back of your neck and you want to see how the other idiots play in this game particularly. And with 5 characters to choose from, that means you get a solid 10 combinations to utilize with their respective gimmicks. Like in Sonic Heroes, there are 3 main abilities each character has at their disposal. You got Speed paired with Sonic, Power paired with Knuckles, and Fly, which you guessed it, is paired with Tails. That allows you an additional speed boost, a stronger attack to use for Eggman and enemies, and Fly abilities that allows easier access to certain parts of the stages, or just something funny to indulge in before you inevitably realize that you got shit to do in this game and a tolerance of pain to endure. However, I only used a good amount of 4 pair combinations for the sake of variety here and at least something to show for, because honestly, while this mechanic is neat and all, it's not something that can be trusted in terms of clearing the stage overall. Most of the time you'll end up playing as Sonic and occasionally Tails and Knuckles because of that classic era nostalgia, but having to pair them with a secondary character ultimately makes you choose Sonic by default, since the whole point of a Sonic game is fast-paced platforming. The other just sort of slow the pace, which is fine for that exploration value I mentioned, but that's really about it. They don't present a challenge, and most of the time you will consider these combinations as an afterthought since they're just underutilized in the end, which already says a lot about this game as a whole. And don't even ask me about the special stages either for this stupid game, because I did not even bother at all for this one, as in order to unlock them, you need to at least find 9 chows that are scattered throughout each zone and its stages. Once you do find them all, there's a special spring like that of Sonic Advance 1 waiting for you to enter what is basically another pseudo 3D special stage. Man, this special stage, I'm sorry. I dealt with all the special stages in Sonic Advance 2 for every character, and that to me is already enough, thank you very much. And with what I already said about the stage designs, I'm not going to push myself towards replaying this game again and again, even if we now have guides to make things easier. I will at least say though that the inclusion of the chows and their integration into Sonic Advance 3 is something else that I'm surprised it took DIMS that long to incorporate into the series properly. I knew already that in all Sonic Advance games you were able to have a tiny chow garden to take care of and could even import and export some chows to your chow gardens in both Sonic Adventure games, almost as if they're going into customs at an airport, but seeing them as part of the general gameplay style of Sonic Advance 3 here felt rather rewarding, satisfying, relieved.
At this point, I don't even know.
Again, these are nice little touches to the continuity of the adventure era, but this doesn't help present a case of what Sonic Advance 3 already is, in my opinion, a very, very mediocre 2D Sonic game at its best, and a jumbled up mess of a Sonic game at its worst, with how much it tried to do and failed at the end due to poor execution. Like, man, looking back at my experience here, I have some mixed feelings about this game because there are some good things that I think were neat and enjoyable here, but easily got overshadowed by the things I hated overall. It just dropped the bag so hard that it just feels like a lackluster presentation and something that just needed a little bit more time and note exchanging to make it seem more worthwhile. There is simply way too much that goes against the premise of what I think this game should have been, that it feels like Sonic Advance 3 was way too ambitious for its time, because truth be told, if this game was made for the Nintendo DS like Sonic Rush did back in 2005, then I'm sure the game's level design would work well with better hardware and allow more wiggle room to see what the stages would have had presented. But because it was made on a tinier screen and less to work with, it just feels like a lot to take in all at once. Sonic Advance 3 to me really missed the mark and brings a rather embarrassing conclusion to what is considered a really good sub-series for the Sonic franchise that I could say as a whole I really liked and wish I didn't miss out on back when they initially released.
I mean, I was raised a DS kid, so what can I say?
The pixel art is something that will stick with me regarding these games, and a part of me now wishes more than ever for a Sonic Advance Mania, since it would help a lot on Advance 3 stage designs having a redo of sorts, especially when you look back at how marvelous Mania as a classic style game is to this very day, nostalgia pandering or otherwise. Just give the Advance games a new coat of paint, the same developers of Mania, and you got yourselves a good ass solid 2D modern game that would be just exciting to play.
Come on, Sega, I know you want this, I'm just practically giving you the idea for free.
The animation, stage designs, music, and overall identity these games possess, well, what two of them have anyways, as they moved on towards the modern era of Sonic is also another thing that I absolutely love and will miss the most with this trilogy here. They just nailed so many things right in providing that classic era platforming while also ensuring the fans of the adventure era something new and modern at the time. They were fun to breeze through and something just so refreshing to look at today, where the discourse of Sonic games are, well, there's certainly something, that's for sure. I mean, remember the shit Frontiers had back when it released?
Besides all that, I know that I'm gonna miss playing the Sonic Advance Trilogy because these were really fun games at the end of the day, just that with Sonic Advance 3 particularly, it just felt off. But you wanna know something though? All this talk about 2D handheld adventures has me thinking about maybe diving into the Sonic Rush trilogy somewhere down the line, especially since I kinda grew up with that era of 2D Sonic games particularly. And yeah, I know many of you guys are aware of why I call Sonic Rush mid, which yeah, I said it, and I'll say it again, Sonic Rush is mid. Don't try and tempt fate here by the way, because in case you weren't aware, I'm also a Sonic fan. But as always, thank you guys so much for watching, love you all to 120 forever, and always stay safe and sexy out there, be awesome, peace out, and take care. This is definitely gonna be a video when it comes out.